Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's forum on an Article 5 convention at the Heartland Institute. I'm Kyle Michaely, and I am the project manager of constitutional reform, along with being moderator for tonight's event. Thank you for joining us and spending part of your evening with us, despite all this bad snow going on. We greatly appreciate it. To those who are watching through our online live stream, we extend a warm welcome to all of you. The Heartland Institute is a think tank founded in 1984 with the mission to develop, discover, and promote free market solutions to the world's social and economic problems. Last summer, we moved into this beautiful building here in Arlington Heights after spending more than 30 years in the city of Chicago. One of the great things we get to do here at this new building here in Arlington Heights is put on great events like these. And we would like to invite our new neighbors. We hope to see you again and again, and also consider being a member of the Heartland Institute. You will find these envelopes on your table. We consider and hope that you will consider being a member of the Heartland Institute. Your support, joined with that of thousands of others, makes tonight's event possible. Tonight's forum is sponsored by the Center for Constitutional Reform, which is the newest center at the Heartland Institute. And to give more of an in-depth introduction is our president, Joe Bast.
Thank you, Kyle. All right, well, let me add my thanks to all of you for showing up. Not much of a snowstorm out there, so you guys didn't exactly prove that you're hardy Midwesterners by making it out here. But we are glad that you're here. We are very proud of this building, as Kyle said. It took us a long time. We were downtown for 31 years, and we were getting 30, 40 people at our events. And we come out here, and the very first events that we're holding, we're getting 30 and 40 people. So it's our hope that we're in a place that's a lot more friendly to our ideas, and we feel like we're coming home out here in the northwest suburbs. Diane is my wife. She's sitting right here, the beautiful blonde. Diane and I, Diane is Heartland's senior editor. Diane and I live just 10 minutes away from here and have for going on 30 years, 25 years, I suppose. So this has been a great move for us. I'm going to very briefly describe why we created the Center for Constitutional Reform. The Heartland Institute has 4 other centers, centers on healthcare, budget and tax issues, school reform, and environment and climate. Those are the 4 main topic areas that we address. And then starting about a year ago, we said maybe we need a 5th center on constitutional reform. And we felt that we needed that because we seem to be winning a lot of battles but losing the war. The national government just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I've devoted my whole life to trying to shrink government, and I'm looking at Washington, D.C., and I see $1 trillion annual deficits. I see a $19 trillion debt. I mean, these are just staggering numbers. 5 years ago, we didn't think that was even possible. Well, let's say 10 years ago. We thought $1 trillion deficit would just, the markets would never support that. That would be catastrophe. And now you barely blink an eye. They pass this stuff on weekends and they just go on. What's going on? What's happening? Most Americans self-identify as conservatives. 80% of us say government is too big. We want less government. That's what the opinion polls show. How come we keep getting more government? Well, part of the reason, part of the problem is the Constitution, which was designed to put limits on the size and power of the national government, isn't doing that anymore. It's been circumvented. And once government can tax without limit, spend without limit, and borrow without limit, we're trying to push a really big rock up a really steep hill. And in order to level that playing field, in order for us to be able to get the national government back into the box that the founders thought they had put it in, I think we need to go back to the Constitution and find out how they broke it and if we can fix it. And that's what constitutional reform is all about. There's 4 ways to do this. The U.S. Congress can propose an amendment, pass it, and send it to the states for ratification. The states and citizens themselves can do what's called an Article 5 convention. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. States can come together and form compacts. These compacts can do various things that individual states can't do. And it comes, in some ways, it can overlap with constitutional reform. And finally, nullification. States can basically tell the national government, no, we are not going to enforce that law because we feel it's unconstitutional. And then they can go into the courts and they can work their way through it. Nullification has actually been used successfully on a number of things, and it's in play on a number of pieces of legislation today. So those are the four options. A Article 5 convention is what we're going to be meeting about tonight. Heartland's role in all of this is just to promote everybody else. At this point, we're not trying to make an original contribution to the research. We're not saying this approach is better than that approach. We're saying let's try to promote all of these approaches and see which one crosses the finish line first. Let's just try to get them all to work together. Let's promote their efforts. Let's publish and reprint their work. Let's hold events like this to try to identify new support for all of these things, all of these efforts, and then leave it up to you folks to decide which efforts have the most promise, which ones you want to get behind and perhaps support. Okay. So that's why Heartland is in this thing. Thank you very much for attending. There's a flyer on your table that says join us. There's lots of things that you can do with the Heartland Institute other than giving money. Of all these bullet points on here, there's only one thing that says I can make a financial contribution. The rest is, help write letters to the editor, help us on our website, help host an event, be a volunteer. There's lots of things that you can do that don't involve money. So I hope you'll take a look at that, maybe check off a few boxes, fill out the form, and leave it with us before you leave today. Okay? And with that, Kyle Mickley is coming back to the podium.
All right.
Kyle.
Thanks. All right, so now we will get into the specifics of tonight's debate. Each speaker will get 5 minutes for their opening statement and for the first 3 questions. The fourth question is going to be a 10-minute segment. We will have a portion of tonight's forum reserved for questions and answers from the audience. So now, without any further delay, let's introduce tonight's participants for the debate. To my right is Neal Schuerer. He is the Executive Director of Campaign Constitution, which is an organization that is promoting a simulation to an Article 5 convention. He used to have been a member of the Iowa State Legislature and served as District Director to Colorado Congressman Doug Lamborn. And joining us via Skype is the Honorable Judge Thomas Brennan. Judge Brennan is a former justice on the Michigan State Supreme Court and is the founder of the Thomas Scully Law School, which is located in Western Michigan. Please welcome these 2 gentlemen to the Heartland Institute, and let's get the debate started. One last thing before we start the debate is when you hear this bell, that means your time is up. So we're going to ask all participants to be respectful of the time limit set in tonight's debate. And to open it up, Judge Brennan.
Kyle, thank you very much for the introduction, and I want to thank Joe Bast and Jim Lakely as well for inviting me to participate in this conference. This is a very interesting experience for me, be doing so on Skype, and but I can see the back of the heads of the folks out there in front of me, so I guess I know there's an assembly. Let me first of all introduce myself. I grew up in Detroit, one of 5 children, in a working class family. My dad worked for a bank. Went to the University of Detroit, 2 years of pre-law and then 3 years of law school. On graduating from law school, I proceeded to start running for public office. I lost 2 campaigns for the state legislature, one for the United States Senate. I was defeated by a man named John Dingell back in 1955. And then I ran twice unsuccessfully for Common Pleas Court of Detroit. So finally, in 1961, after losing 5 times and being designated as a loser, I was elected to the Detroit Common Pleas Court. 8 years later, I found myself elected the youngest Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Michigan in its history. I served on the Supreme Court, 7 years of an 8-year term, and I left toward the end, at the end of the last year of my term, at the beginning of the last year of my term, to found the Thomas Cooley Law School, which we did on a wing and a prayer. Actually began with 76 students. We had no blackboard, we had no chalk, we had no full-time teachers. We had a lot of opposition from newspapers and the other law schools, but we had a dream, and we believed that there was a place for a law school in the state's capital. By the time I retired from the school in 2002, the Thomas Cooley Law School was the largest accredited college of law in the United States with 5 campuses. And so it was a very successful endeavor, but it was basically one, like my getting elected to office, where a great deal of perseverance was needed. Since I left the law school, I've been embarking on something that is, I feel, very badly needed in this country, and that is a constitutional convention to propose amendments to our present Constitution. I know that Kyle will introduce us as having a simulated convention proposal, but the proposal that I have worked on for the last number of years is called Convention USA. It is not a simulation. It is an alternative way to hold an actual constitutional convention. The background to that is very simple. The founders of our nation put into our Constitution Article 5, which says that the Constitution can be amended by a proposal that comes out of the Congress with 2/3 vote in both houses, or it can be amended by a proposal that comes from a convention called by the Congress after 2/3 of the states have requested it. Well, the fact is that in the history of our country, there have been over 700 requests by the states for a convention under Article 5. And the Congress not only hasn't called the convention, they haven't even counted the petitions. They paid no attention to them. And I maintain that no matter how many states ask for a convention, Congress is never going to do it. And the reason is, if you study the notes of the Philadelphia Convention in 1787, the reason they put Article 5 in the Constitution and the Article 5 Convention was to provide a means for the states to rein in a rogue national government. They were pretty sure that sooner or later the national government would get out of control and that it would impinge on the proper jurisdiction of the states. And so they put this into the Constitution for that very purpose. Unfortunately, they gave the Congress the power to call the convention. And the result of it is that we're sort of stalemated. And the fact is that Congress, no matter how many petitions are filed, is never, ever going to call a convention. Now, the question in my mind is if the Constitution says the people of this country are entitled to a mandatory constitutional convention and the Congress won't call it, what do we do as citizens? Are we helpless? I say no. The First Amendment gives us the right peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for the redress of our grievances. If we can assemble peaceably and if we have the right of free speech, we have the right to conduct a convention. And so I've started this project, Convention USA, on the internet. My concept is that there's no reason we can't actually conduct the convention on the internet. We don't have to come together in a big room. And frankly, our founders of our country expected our Congress to have no more than each representative in Congress to represent no more than 50,000 people. Now, had we been doing that all these years, we'd have a Congress, House of Representatives of 6,166 people. In fact, our Congress grew from 1787 through about 1910 from 60 people in the House to 435. But in about 1910, they froze the House of Representatives at 435 people. So every 10 years, they represent more and more people. The House remains the same size, and we get further and further away from representative democracy in this country. In any case, what we have done with Convention USA, which I recommend you look at on the internet, as we have created 1,011 districts throughout the country, drawn along county lines, in which there will be 6,166 people elected in nonpartisan elections. Those elections are held on the internet, and any registered voter can file to be a delegate or to be a candidate for delegate. And so our plan is ultimately, when we get that full compartment of 6,166 people, we will proceed to consider some important issues and make some recommendations for actual proposals for constitutional amendments. Did I just hear the bell? Maybe I guess
No,
I didn't.
you did not.
Well, it's hard to hear when you're talking, especially. But in any case, if you go on the internet and you look at conventionusa.org, you will find that we have already started generating some support. We've got some 420 people or so that have signed up as delegates. Every state in the union has some delegates, except for Wyoming. I can't seem to shake them loose in Wyoming, but Wyoming is entitled to 11 delegates, and sooner or later we'll have 11 good folks up there too. But the idea is that that we will be able to propose things and debate things on television, in a public forum, and have our delegates actually sitting at home watching and voting on their computers. And the public will be invited to look up the name of their local delegate and call them or write them, tweet them or email them or her, and give them their opinion of how they ought to vote on these various issues. But on the first page of our website, you'll find a survey, and that survey will refer you to 23 constitutional issues which we think are important, and which are not necessarily right-wing or left-wing. They're just operating system amendments that will make our government more efficient and more as the founders intended it to be. Then there, some things like the 23rd Amendment, where we have adopted an amendment which gives the people of the District of Columbia one vote for the President of the United States. It's a goofy thing. I mean, the fact of the matter is, what should be done in the District of Columbia is the people should be returned to Maryland and Virginia and allowed to participate with their local state in electing congressmen, electing senators, and voting for the president in that fashion. There's no reason why those areas should be territories like Guam or the Mariana Islands, where they're not actually citizens of a state in the United States.
Judge Brennan, so you're going on 8 minutes on your opening statement, so thank you. Mr. Schuerer.
Sure. Okay, there's the bell. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle and Joe and all of the folks at Heartland to have Campaign Constitution and myself here representing the organization. And Judge, I was looking forward to shaking your hand. I'm sorry we're not able to do it this time, but I'm sure our paths will cross again. As Kyle had mentioned, I'm Neal Schuerer. I'm Executive Director of Campaign Constitution, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization committed to fixing the system, reforming the Constitution. And we at Campaign Constitution believe that bold citizens using a mock convention will set the stage for constitutional change that will provide better leaders, which in turn will give us better government. And that's really the emphasis of Campaign Constitution. As you know, over the years, people have laid out the why we need this. And even Dr. Carson, in his most recent book, A More Perfect Union, outlined the why, all of the problems that are out there, what needs to be directed. And what we need to do now, and this is where I feel Heartland is taking the lead in bringing together all of the Article 5 Convention of States organizations that are operating out there and bringing us together so that we can talk about what we're doing and making sure that the how is put in place. I happen to think in campaign constitution, we believe that a way to take people by the hand, the citizens of this country, taking them by the hand and showing them that this can be done legally and orderly, and that it would open the door to an amendment convention outlined in Article 5. That's what we're all about. And there's a lot of groups out there doing a lot of good work, educating the folks, educating state legislatures, doing all the things that need to be done. But we believe that a mock convention is the way to show people that it can be done legally and orderly.
Thank you, Mr. Schuerer. Now we will get into the first question of tonight's debate. The first question goes to Judge Brennan. You will have 5 minutes to respond. Judge Brennan, please explain to the audience in brief terms what Convention USA is about.
In my first segment, then, what it is about holding an actual alternative constitutional convention. First of all, a lot of the folks who are involved in this sort of constitutional reform are very sensitive about calling what they do a constitutional convention. They like to call it an amendments convention, Article 5 convention, and they're deathly afraid of calling it a constitutional convention because there's so much opposition out there today. Newspapers, the John Birch Society, the Brennan Center, named after Bill Brennan, not me, in New Jersey, various organizations from the far left, the far right, both political parties are all opposed to an Article 5 convention. And they're opposed because they're afraid it's going to run away. It's going to attempt to rewrite the entire Constitution. And it's going to be controlled by special interests, going to be controlled by the bad guys, whoever they are. And this fear of this convention is a paralyzing thing. And so what the people who are trying to get the balanced budget amendment, term limits amendment, some of these other things are very touchy and very much involved in the effort of trying to play down what they're doing and saying, well, this is not going to become a full-blown convention. It's not a constitutional convention. It's just an amendments convention. It has to do only what we want it to do and nothing else. Well, the fact of the matter is all those arguments are off base. A convention is a constituent assembly. A convention makes its own rules. A convention sets its own agenda. And that's the nature of a convention. It's the nature of an assembly. And so all these efforts that they have to have these one-issue conventions and so forth, frankly, I think are doomed, and they're self-defeating. So what we're trying to do with Convention USA, very simply, is to have a convention which is populated by the kind of people who, in their own communities, would be drawn for jury service. The average folks have the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the local school teacher, the lawyer, the bus driver, people who are drawn for jury service, who hear important cases, deciding life and death matters, deciding millions of dollars in damages and judgments, and they do so because they have good common sense. And they listen to the evidence, and they listen to the arguments of the lawyers and the instruction of the judges, and they sit down and they talk to each other, and they come to wise decisions. I was a trial judge for several years, and I know I have that sense that the juries do very good work. And they're just ordinary folks. Well, that's what we are trying to pull together in Convention USA. We want 6,166 neighbors, the kind of folks that live next door to you, the kind of folks who are whose names are drawn for jury duty. And they don't have to draft any amendments and so forth. We've got a lot of people out there that want to draft amendments. They're writing books about amending the Constitution. George Will, Mark Levin, all of these people. They write books and they come up with all kinds of ideas. Some of them are good, some of them aren't so good. But they should be debated in a way so that the public can see it, and debated in a way so that the 6,166 delegates can watch it and can decide and vote on their computers which way to go on these things. This is the way we see this as being done. Now, people will say, well, if it's not called by the Congress, what good is it? Well, I guess my answer to that is there's only about four things can possibly happen. Number one, nobody might pay any attention. That's possible. The second thing is that the members of Congress may see, once the convention has adopted a proposal, that it's a good proposal and something they can actually support with 2/3 in both houses. And so the Congress itself could propose an amendment that comes out of this convention. And then, of course, the third thing, which is kind of a tricky.
Judge, you got about 20 seconds left. So.
Well, the final thing is that the convention could send the matter out to the states themselves and say to the states, here's our proposal, ratify it in your legislature, ratify it also by a convention in your state, and when it's been ratified in both ways, then we'll take it to Washington and the Congress will be required to accept it.
Thank you, Judge Brennan. Mr. Schuerer.
Constitution, we believe that it needs to be under the format of Article 5 Convention of States. And so we believe that is the end result of what we're doing. It's an Article 5 Convention of States. I'll get it up here a little bit closer. And we believe that process is more important than policy. When you have 34 states, we're going to need to agree, the several states at this time, it will be process, not policy, that will bring us all together and have that we can accomplish this. Campaign Constitution is a nonprofit organization with transparency that we are interested in the future of this country, not interested in promoting any particular idea or ideology. We want bold citizens stepping out and making this happen. Our mock convention generally will show people that this can be done legally and orderly. We will engage all of the states. We will look to the individuals in those states that are leaders in their legislature that will be invited to come on a nonpartisan basis. Our business plan calls for 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats in a state, and then they will choose the 5th person to gather together 250 individuals, 5 from each of the 50 states. Our procedures will be set up as any convention with a basic set of rules, set up germaneness provisions so that everyone understands what is to be accomplished. Primarily, our proposal honors the states, and that's what we want to do. It is the state legislatures that will be applying to Congress to host an amendment convention. And here is the result of our mock convention. As we have those distinguished leaders from each state coming together, working through the process, deciding on what issues are most important to the states, will propose a resolution that they will take back to their states that will form the basis of the application to Congress for Congress to legally call an amendment convention, setting the time and place and how the amendments are to be ratified. And state legislatures are the basis of Article 5. It is the states that created the federal government. It will be the states that will come together and reorder our federal government.
Thank you, Mr. Schuerer. Now we will go into the second question of the debate, and it is Mr. Schuerer's turn. You have 5 minutes to respond. We have already known about what is Convention USA and what is Campaign Constitution. Now we want to ask, what makes your proposal better than the other? Question goes to Mr. Schuerer.
You know, as we talked about earlier, everybody understands the why we need constitutional reform, why the Heartland Institute created a center, why that was created. Now we have to show the citizens of the United States of America the how. How do we get it done? There's great organizations out there that are engaging state legislators, that are engaging citizens, and we believe at Campaign Constitution that bold citizens are the ones that are going to be encouraging their state legislators to go out and look at this. So that's why we believe a mock convention, committing nobody to anything, but showing people in this country that we can bring this together, that we can accomplish this, and that it can be done legally and orderly. And as we go out and deal with the individuals, those leaders, as Madison talked about in the 57th Federalist paper, where Madison talked about that we need to make sure that our elected officials, that our leaders of our constitutional republic are wise and virtuous. And secondly, and most importantly, that we as citizens need to do everything in our power to make sure that they stay wise and virtuous. And I think maybe if we looked at our political system, we've kind of stepped away from that. We've not taken up that responsibility as citizens and as state legislatures. So that's why we believe bringing those leaders in a setting like a mock convention, a simulation, that we can work through the important issues of the day, how we need to reorder the relationship of the states and the federal government, and accomplish what we want to do.
Thank you, Mr. Schuerer. Judge Brennan.
Well, I have to say that I admire Neal Schuerer for his efforts to make a presentation here on behalf of Campaign Constitution. I have gone on the internet and I've looked at studied at some detail that website, Campaign Constitution. It's the work of a man named John Cogswell. And Cogswell is a very successful and eminent attorney at law who has had a wonderful career. But I gather he's getting on in years, like I am, and people at our age that have great dreams and great ideas. His website indicates to me that there's nobody in it except John Cogswell. He talks about the Citizens Committee, but he hasn't got anybody on it. He talks about expert advisors, but he doesn't have any. He's got 44 different suggestions for constitutional amendments, which, in my opinion, most of them are not constitutional language. One of them, for example, is a constitutional amendment requiring the government to disclose everything it knows about UFOs. That's so far from being a rational and reasonable constitutional amendment that I can't even comment on it. So, there are lots of folks in this country who are disgusted with our government. I mean, look at the way the Republican nominations are going. Everybody knows there's an anger in the nation, in the streets. Everybody wants to change, and so there are lots of folks out on the internet who want to change. They want the constitutional amendments of one kind or another. But the question is, can you do so in a practical way that will really work? And what we're doing with Convention USA will really work, because there's no great requirement for millions of dollars to be poured into it. Our delegates are unpaid; they're ordinary folks. There'll be a clout, believe me, when you have 6,000 people elected in every county in the United States voting on proposals that have been debated publicly. The League of Women Voters, is very much in favor of the type of thing that we're trying to do. They've talked about a constitutional convention under Article 5, but they said, number one, it should be transparent. It should be open to the public. Secondly, they say the delegates should be elected and not appointed. Then finally, they say that the voting in the convention should include votes by the delegate rather than by the states. What we do in Convention USA is our rules provide that no proposal will go forward unless it is approved by representatives by 38 states, by the representatives of 38 states. That would be 3/4 of the states. And secondly, approved by a majority of all the delegates. That would be a majority of all the people of the United States representing. So we would count both ways. I don't think you can sneak through a constitutional amendment just getting red states or blue states and have a certain kind of amendment that a substantial number of the people in this country disapprove of just because you've got the states. That's not the way our nation works, and it's just not practical. When you figure that there are only about 5 or 6 states in this country that have a majority of the population, you can't count them out and say, well, we're going to amend the Constitution without asking New York or California or Texas or Florida to participate. That's simply not practical. And so the practical thing is the only thing that you can amend the Constitution, the only way you can amend the Constitution is with amendments that appeal to the left and the right, appeal to all common sense citizens. For example, why don't we have a larger House of Representatives? Why should we freeze it at 435? Because that's the number of seats we have. That's the number of desks we have. That's how big the room is. We have modern communication. We have internet. We have electronics. There's no reason why representatives in Congress have to be sitting in the same room. One of the questions we have on our survey on our website is, do you think that the congressmen should be required to live in their district? Does anybody know that our Constitution doesn't require a congressman to live in his district? They don't. The Constitution says he has to be a resident of the state, but not of the district. Well, people think they should live in their district. And this business of gerrymandered districts, can you believe these districts? There's a district in Florida that runs from Jacksonville all the way down to Orlando, and some parts of it just runs for miles along a freeway to reach some other town. These districts are drawn by the political parties in order to make them safe Democratic or safe Republican trade-off districts. And the only thing that the people in those districts have in common with each other is the same congressman. They don't have the sense of community that we live in a county. We have interests as a people who are farmers or whoever we are in our county, and we want to be represented by somebody who thinks and believes as we do. Now, our delegates to the convention are being elected in nonpartisan elections. There's no reference to their party affiliation on our website, and that's the way it should be. People who are chosen for jury service are not chosen because of their party affiliation. They're chosen because of their citizenship, and that's all we're interested in Convention USA. So it's a bold idea to actually hold a convention of the citizens of this country. But I saw an idea grow with Cooley Law School over a period of years. And this may not be done in my lifetime. I'm an old man, but I think the path is laid out, and if followed faithfully and with vigor, it'll happen. And once it happens, I think it'll catch on. And the public are big on listening to debates. We had millions and millions of people listening to the debates in this last year. The cost for advertising on those debates, which would normally be about $50,000 for a 30-second ad, went to $450,000. So you can imagine the economic value of having so many people watching these things. I think that good debates about constitutional issues, about term limits, about the size of the House of Representatives, about having a nonpartisan Supreme Court. I wrote a blog here the other day. The Republicans are going to hold up Obama's designation of a Supreme Court justice.
Excuse me, Judge Brennan, you got 1 minute left.
Yeah, to succeed Scalia. Well, what should be done is the idea that Senator Sam Ervin had. The president should have to appoint from a panel of 5 people sent to him by the chief justices of the 50 state Supreme Courts. That's the way to get the court out of politics. Don't let the president appoint somebody who has his own agenda.
Thank you, Judge Brennan. Now we will go into the third segment of the debate. This next question is for Judge Brennan. The question is that opponents of an Article 5 convention will say that the process will be hijacked by special interest groups, and they will claim that it will lead to a runaway convention. And these charges are coming from organizations on the hard left and the hard right. On the hard right, they're coming from the John Birch Society and Eagle Forum. On the hard left, they're coming from groups like Common Cause and the Center for Media and Democracy. What do you hope your organization will do in addressing these charges?
Well, very simply, Kyle, the difference between Convention USA and all the other things, Convention of the States and the Compact for America and all these others, the difference between our effort and the other efforts is that we have a method of selecting delegates. We are actually in the process of selecting the delegates. They're nonpartisan people. They're people who volunteer to participate. The other people are all talking about delegates being selected by the legislatures, and what they don't realize is when they do get two-thirds of the states to petition Congress and they were able to hold Congress's feet to the fire, the Congress is going to tell them how those delegates are going to be selected, because the Congress doesn't want a convention, and if they have to have a convention because their feet are being held to the fire, you can bet that they'll surround the convention with all kinds of rules and regulations to make sure that it can't hurt them, that it won't do any of the things they don't want done to them. So they'll probably find a simple way to write a rule that says that the delegates to the convention will be appointed by the congressmen and by the senators. So now the fact of the matter is that the people who are participating as delegates in Convention USA are not special interests. They're not big money people. They're not people who lobby. They're not people who have an interest in controlling the process and controlling the legislature. They're ordinary citizens. They're jurors, and they are the kind of people who are going to listen to the proposals, the debates, and they're going to make decisions that are in the best interest of our country, and they're not going to run away. They love their Constitution, they love their country, and they're not going to have any screwy ideas to run away with them.
Thank you, Judge Brennan. Mr. Schuerer.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Judge, and your organization and what you're planning is the absolute best way to determine what is really out there. What are Americans looking for in terms of constitutional reform? And getting those things down and getting them in writing and submitting it, whether it's to the states or to the Congress or whatever. But bottom line, and understand exactly what you're saying, Judge, but you're talking about proportional representation, you're talking about direct democracy, you're talking about one of the tyrannies that our founders tried to protect ourselves against is tyranny of the majority. That's why with our proposal honoring the states, we're going to make sure that one state, one vote. That is the way that it was left to us. If we want to change that, then that needs to be part of constitutional reform. But I'll tell you today, to get 3/4 of the states to agree with proportional approvals, it won't happen. But I just appreciate Convention USA and sifting and sorting through the issues that need to be done. Brings us right back to campaign constitution and all of the fears that are being thrown out there, and everybody, there's always somebody in the crowd that'll say, it's time to retreat. I mean, it's human nature, and that's partly what got us into this problem, because our leaders that we've elected, because we have not held them accountable, they're interested in their own political position, they're interested in their own political future, not in the future of this country. And particularly this year, we're seeing an anger out there with the people in the United States, and you can relay that in a lot of different ways. It comes from both sides of the aisle, but I'm telling you today, a mock convention bringing the leaders, those people that are well respected in each state, as Madison referred to as wise and virtuous, bringing them together, directed by their states, not coming independent of their states, coming together, taking a lot of the ideas, Judge, that your citizens have come together with, meeting, deciding what are the issues that are most important for the future of this country, passing this resolution out in a mock setting so nobody's committed to anything, then having those leaders lead that charge in their individual state to apply to Congress so that we can have an amendment convention to provide an environment for better leadership, not enshrining any political ideology, whether it comes from either side, but things that will help this country elect better leaders, make better decisions that will provide us better government. And that's what campaign constitution's about. That's how we're overcoming some of those objections. Anybody that studies the issue knows that it cannot be a runaway convention. It's just, it just won't happen. And we'll show that through a mock national convention.
Thank you, Mr. Schuerer. Now we will be going into the fourth, final, and question and answer segment before we get into audience questions and answers. We will have somebody walking around the building with a microphone when it gets closer to audience question and answers. So when it gets closer to that time, please raise your hand and we will get to the audience question and answers. But now we will go to the fourth and final segment. Is now you two have talked about briefly what your proposal is, how it actually works, and how you're rebutting against the runaway convention charges. Now, let's talk about the moment when it actually all comes together. What will somebody expect from your organization, especially when they finally see that, for example, like Campaign Constitution will finally have, when it gets to that day, 250 people from all 50 states actually simulating an Article 5 convention. And with that, I give the floor to Mr. Schuerer.
Thank you, Kyle. First and foremost, it will be less talk and more action. We have talked this issue to death. We know what the problems are. We're going to mobilize Americans by answering the questions. We will show them that it can be done. It can be done legally and orderly. As we go through with this, we will be discussing our nonpartisan approach. We'll show that we can come together as Americans, as U.S. citizens, and determine what is best for this country. We have a fully transparent policy. It'll explain, we will bring together the rules that have dealt with other conventions like this that shows that it can be done orderly. And really the bottom line is working with media involvement, working with information, getting the people there, they'll be talking about it. It will win the hearts and minds of the American people.
Thank you, Mr. Schuerer. Judge Brennan.
Well, I may just comment about the idea of a simulated convention using state legislators, 5 from each state to 250 people. I don't know whether, Neal, you've heard about the Assembly of State Legislatures, but it began actually a couple of years ago with a meeting at Mount Vernon in Washington, near the nation's capital. And it was all state legislators. They had 100 state legislators together in a locked room, and they talked about having an Article 5 convention or proposing amendments to the Constitution on whatever. They then proceeded to have a second meeting, I believe, in Indiana, and they've had 2 others since then. They've been debating and discussing the rules. The last time they got together, they got into some heated discussions on the basis of partisan politics. And the fact of the matter is that all these members of the state legislature are Republicans and Democrats. And the Republican Party doesn't want an Article 5 convention. And the Democratic Party doesn't want an Article 5 convention nationally. You go to the the Democratic National Committee, the Republican National Committee. They're against it, just as same as the John Birch Society, and just the same as the people on the far left. So the fact of the matter is that getting 5 members of every state legislature together to sit for a week or whatever length of time it takes to hold this mock convention is a pipe dream. Unless you've got somebody that's got millions and millions of dollars, you're going to pay them all a fee to go and spend 5 or 6 days with their colleagues and doing this exercise, because they're not going to do it. I mean, that's just a pipe dream. So yeah, it'd be nice if you had 250 state legislators, 5 from every state, get together and come up with some ideas. But they're not going to do that. And if they could do that, they would do it through the Association, the Assembly of State Legislatures, which is an organization that the members of the state legislatures have already created. So again, I'm sorry, Neal, but John Cogswell is a daydreamer, and the idea of doing something like you've described with the 5 people from every state, unless he's got millions of dollars, it just isn't going to happen.
I will give a chance to Mr. Schuerer to give a brief response back.
Well, in Judge, I appreciate it. And one of the things that drew me to the Heartland Institute and their Center for Constitutional Reform is what's happened to every other issue that has been facing this country since really World War II. And that is, we have become fractioned. And it is probably the better word is gridlock. Our founders talked about it in the 10th Federalist paper about factions and how that is going to destroy our republic. And we're kind of at that point today. There was a similar point in time in 1860 where we had a man that truly believed that he could bring that calming hand to the nation, and several of the issues were solved that way. We've got a very contentious time again today, and it's again with factions. This is why it has to be nonpartisan. It has to break away from the Washington-directed approach, and that's why our founders provided for Article 5 for states. And your proposal of bringing and cooking the ideas up and bringing that together, where there's a lot of groups out there that are doing that, and Heartland is bringing us together so that we can talk about it. But when it comes down to it, it is going to be the states that have the constitutional authority to amend the U.S. Constitution. And that's why we believe bringing them together in a national mock convention setting, showing people that it can be done legally and orderly and not making any commitments. And that will educate our young people, that will educate our citizens, and the bold citizens that will be working with the state legislature. Their direct representatives will accomplish this. And it's not easy. As you mentioned, you've been working on it a long time. John Cogswell's been working on it a long time. And we're at a deciding point today, and we have to move forward. That's why I believe this mock convention is the right way to start the ball rolling.
Thank you, Mr. Schuerer. Now we will begin the audience question and answers. The first question is through our online chat room, and Jim will answer that question or read it. So,
thank you, Kyle. This is from Kyle Eason, who's watching our live stream on YouTube right now. First of all, thanks both of our guests for being here tonight, and the Heartland Institute for bringing you here, and we extend those thanks. He says, I'm curious as to where the funding will come from for these kinds of efforts. Do we know where funding has come from in the past? Who were some of the movers and shakers in this regard at this time?
I will give it first to Mr. Schuerer.
Well, it's just like in anything. Whether it's in an organization like Heartland or any nonprofit or even any business, nothing happens until a sale is made. And we need to look for interested citizens, folks that are interested in the future of this country, to come alongside organizations that they believe can make a difference. And that's something that we at Campaign Constitution are looking for, people that want to partner with us, that are willing to take these next steps, to educate the next generation, to educate our state legislators, that they can in confidence step out and make this important decision for the future of this country. That's what it takes. It takes willing people interested in investing in what we're doing.
Judge Brennan.
Well, I can tell you who's this funding Convention USA. when I started it, I thought I was going to have the delegates paying dues. And we decided on $10 a month. And we did that for about 4 or 5 months. And we found out that we weren't getting any new delegates. And so finally, I just said, the heck with it. We canceled the whole idea of paying dues and said that anybody who's a registered voter wants to sign up as a delegate would be welcome. And so we then began getting a good deal more delegates. I've invested a lot of my own money in this thing. I'm not a wealthy man, but I probably have $30,000 in it. A few of my friends have chipped in $1,000 a piece. I think we had one meeting and raised $8,000 at one time. But that's about all. There's no big bucks. No big donors such as to support the presidential campaigns and so forth. But I think eventually we'll make some noise. And I think if we can put our constitutional debates on television, we might just find that we've got a good revenue stream from the debates on television. If we get people like George Will debating term limits and that sort of thing, I think people will listen, and it may just be something where there'll be some revenue from that based on the fact that it has attraction to the public. But it won't cost anything for anybody to sign up as a delegate, and so I think we can reach to the point where we've got a full complement of 6,000 people without spending a lot of money at all.
Thanks, Judge Brennan. We'll go to the next audience question.
Too many people don't own computers, don't have access to computers. They don't even know that this is going on. How can they be a delegate if this whole thing is on the computer? I never heard of something so stupid in my life.
Judge Brennan.
Well, I guess you can call computers stupid, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of people have them, and what we're envisioning actually, and the League of Women Voters are in line with this, is that the actual work of the convention, the debating and so forth, the discussion of emotions, would be on television. Anybody, now when we say, well, everybody doesn't have a television. Well, I guess there are some people who don't even have television. They probably aren't interested in public affairs anyway. But in any case, I think it's fair to say that most Americans have television at least, and many of them have computers. So I would think that once we get our debates going on TV, that there'll be matters that the public generally will be aware of and will have opinions on.
Thank you. Mr. Schuerer.
I would tend to agree with the judge, but again, this would be the ultimate reality show would be a national mock convention. Being there live, like you talked about, ma'am. But at the same time, we have also a website, campaignconstitution.com, and you can look at all of the proposals that the judge referenced to and actually vote on them. And we're showing right now that we have a high percentage of individuals that support the process amendment ideas that we're talking about. Now, granted, not all of them will be agreed to, not all of them will be worked through in a convention, amendment convention, but just getting the discussion out there, getting those thousands of people talking about the changes that need to be done is absolutely critical. But some point in time, you've got to be face to face. You've got to honor the states. The states are the ones that created the federal government. The states are what ratified the Constitution, and the states are going to have to make that decision, one state, one vote, and it is not going to be proportional.
Thank you. We have a question on the far left side.
Kyle, if I may for just a moment, because what Neal just said is I've heard so many times, and it's so wrong. Read the decision of McCullough versus Maryland, written by Chief Justice John Marshall. The states did not form the Constitution. The states do not amend the Constitution. The Constitution was written by the people of the United States, and it will be amended by the people of the United States. That's what Chief Justice Marshall said, and that's what the Constitution began preamble begins as "We the people of the United States," and so it is not something done by the legislators or by the government of the states. That was the Articles of Confederation, with a treaty among the governments of the states. But that's not what the Constitution is. Constitution is the document written document written by the people and for the people, and that's what it is. That's the way it's been decided.
Thank you, Judge Brennan. Next question, far left of the room.
The best way to do this actually is raise your hand. I will come to you, and please identify yourself before asking your question so that people and our guests know who you are.
My name's Vicki Deppie. I'm the Illinois Legislative Liaison for the Convention of States Project, and my question is for Judge Brennan. Judge, you're relying on applications passed by the state legislatures to hold your convention. How do you justify circumventing them in convention, and wouldn't any of the 50 states have standing to ask for the work product of your convention to be vacated in federal court?
I guess I don't understand the question. I'm not necessarily working with the states at all until such time as the convention has done its work and come up with the language for a constitutional amendment, and then you have something to sell to the state legislatures, there's something to sell to the Congress, something to sell to the public in general. And now maybe I misunderstand the question, but I think that's what.
Yep, good. Neal?
Let me just clarify that, and I understand the question. And this is what is so great about our system of government. And this will be when we talk about our mock convention having germaneness provisions or having rules like any meeting. Mason's rules for legislatures is probably the rules that would be started with. And Judge, you would have to agree with me. That would probably be the first thing that we're going to talk about is how do we amend it? I mean, what is the purpose and the intent of that? And I know there's differing opinions over the years, and that's probably one of the first things in a mock convention that we're going to deal with. Just exactly who and how our Constitution is to be amended. And if it is going to be left up to the federal government, you and I agree it'll never be done. It has to be both citizens in the states working with their duly elected representatives, which are the state legislatures, the House and the Senates, that are closest to the people to affect the change of reordering, rebalancing the relationships of the states with the federal government. And that'll be in a mock convention. It'll be the perfect opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Schuerer. Next audience question.
My question is,
Can you identify yourself, please?
Mark Behrens, I'm a practicing attorney. And a parallel. I don't see either of your proposals coming close to the practicality of the interstate compact method, where the states have an interstate compact with the proposed amendments indicated in it, and then it goes to the Congress for both houses do a majority vote. It's the compact.
Brings it back to the discussion of how best to do this. And on the tables there is the Compact for America proposal on how they affect the change with that. The beauty of a national mock convention is to be able to test drive, to take the differing opinions that are out there and talking them through on how we are going to move forward in this country. Our founders provided a very clear approach to amending the Constitution, the agreement that the states came to authorize a federal government, and that's the discussion out there. There's a lot of different groups talking about it. There's 50 different ideas, 300 million different ideas, but we need to come to the table in a civil manner, and right now we don't have that. We have gridlock, and it goes, both sides are responsible, but we need to, in a nonpartisan approach, talk this through and provide an opportunity for the future of this country.
Thank you, Mr. Schuerer. I will give it now to Judge Brennan before the next audience question.
I'm sorry, Kyle, you see,
I'm giving you an opportunity to respond, Judge Brennan.
oh, well, I just, again, I have to say that the idea of the mock convention using actual members of the state legislatures is very impractical. I mean, very unlikely to ever occur. I would say it'd be a great thing if you were to get 250 state legislators together, 5 from each state, and they were to come up with something, any kind of an idea that they agreed on. It would be very impressive. But if you look at the history of the Assembly of State Legislators and the meetings that they've had so far and what they've discussed and the problems that they've had, I think you'd get realistic. It would be very difficult to find 250 state legislators who would come together and do what you're talking about doing. And certainly, I don't know whose idea it was to do that, but if that was Mr. Cogswell's idea, I would say it was very impractical, and he ought to have known better. But get those people together. But I can't imagine being able to get even one state to participate in something like that.
And would you like to comment on the Compact for a Balanced Budget book, please, that we have out at our event tonight?
The Compact for America,
Yes.
you're talking about? That's Chip DeMoss's
Yes.
program. Yeah. Well, that's a typical example of a one-issue thing that is done in such a way so as to somehow make it impossible for the thing to be a runaway convention. And what they've done is they've defined a one-day convention at which there was only one issue and one vote, and they actually have designed it in such a way that the convention will not only vote on their proposal verbatim that they've written, but that they will immediately ratify it, so it becomes then a part of the Constitution. I've read their proposal. I can only tell you it's a cockamamie proposal about a balanced budget. And it just would not stand the light of day if anybody were to start talking about the merits of the action. I mean, the proposal itself is half the length of the Constitution. It's a long, wordy proposal, and it just isn't constitutional, in my opinion, and it certainly isn't going to solve the problem. I mean, all they're trying to do is involve the 5,000 state legislators around the country in the process of raising the national debt limit every time it comes up. Well, that's the whole idea of us having a debt limit that we have to raise every 6 months so we can borrow more money is crazy. But to get the state legislators to participate in that, when you got the legislature of the state of California is billions and billions of dollars in debt and going up by millions every day. The legislature of the state of Illinois, deeply in debt. New York, deeply in debt. Are these state legislators going to be more careful about spending the federal dollars than the people we're sending to Washington? I don't think so.
Thank you, Judge Brennan. We will now go to the next question.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Bob Pritchard from Hinckley, a state representative in the state of Illinois, which is perhaps the most polar example of partisanship. I want to follow up, though, on one question and ask another. When we were talking about who's going to fund either of your efforts, and you were talking about voluntary contributions, aren't you afraid the super PACs are going to come in and dominate the discussion? And then to follow up with another question, after all the debate and after all we're seeing in this presidential election where people are expressing dissatisfaction with Washington, is anyone talking about a constitutional convention?
Mr. Schuerer.
That's an excellent question that needs to be considered as we move through this. But the question that I have, what is the alternative? We have one person sitting on the United States Supreme Court that makes rules for everybody, and everybody has to follow that. We have gridlock. We have folks, again, being beholden to a lot of different interest groups out there, and you can't seem to get people to move. What is the alternative? Well, George Mason IV provided an alternative in the U.S. Constitution. He had a crystal, if anybody has a crystal ball, he had a crystal ball, recognizing at some point in time the federal government would get out of balance and provide it for the states, and we the people, as the judge has mentioned several times, we have the ultimate responsibility to correct that. And we the people, working legally through our state legislatures, the state's legislatures, whatever they decide to do, it takes 34 states. That's not an easy road to do. That's why harmony, the ability to work across party lines, to be nonpartisan, so that we come together and say, this is in the best interest of the country, and we will do this. I believe Americans will raise to the challenge. Our state legislatures will get the courage to do what is right, to redirect the United States of America into the next 200 plus years, or sustain our freedom. That's what we're really talking about. How do we sustain our freedom? I believe, and Campaign Constitution believes, that bold citizens working through a mock convention will provide responsible constitutional reform that will give us better leaders, which in turn will give us better government.
Thank you, Mr. Schuerer. Judge Brennan.
Yes, Kyle, I'd like to address the distinguished legislator from the state of Illinois, because he asked a very pertinent question. Are all these people running for president aware of the need for constitutional reform in our country? I have on our website, Convention USA, we have a survey with, I think it's 23 or 24 questions of issues, constitutional issues, which we believe ought to be addressed. I put this survey together with the yes/no boxes, and I put it in an envelope, and sent it by certified mail to all of the presidential candidates. And I asked them to fill out the survey and send it back to me in a self-addressed stamped envelope, which I included. And so I sent out 23 of these things. It's certified. I know they all received it because the post office told me they all received it. Okay? How many do you think I heard from? I heard from one. You know how he answered the survey? He didn't answer the survey. Donald Trump sent me a bumper sticker. And that was the extent of the interest of our presidential candidates in constitutional reform. So I'm really not particularly heartened by them, although I do see now that Marco Rubio has at least nodded favorably towards an Article 5 convention, and I think Cruz has as well. But the fact of the matter is, they're going to dance around it. They're not going to come out and say they're really in favor of some kind of particular amendment. But I believe that we have to go forward. The people of this country have to go forward. We have to lead. And the politicians will catch on eventually.
Before we get into the next audience question, I also want to expand off of Judge Brennan's point that there have been 3 more high-profile endorsements of Article 5 convention. Last month, you had Texas Governor Greg Abbott said that he's coming out in support of an Article 5 convention, more in the convention of state-style proposal. You're also hearing recently, before Jeb Bush dropped out of the presidential race, that he supports not just an Article 5 for a balanced budget amendment, but to reverse the Citizens United decision. And recently, you have had Ben Carson, another presidential candidate, that said he supports Article 5, but for congressional term limits and term limits on justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. So now we will get to our next audience question.
Phil Weckline, and I'm a geologist. My question is, if it goes so far as to have the authorized constitutional convention, as each item is passed, that becomes constitutional, the law of the land, as long as 3/4 of the states hold together. Could that constitutional convention become an institution in itself, a political institution, that as long as there's 3/4 of the states in it, it has a life and can simply bring up new items at any time?
I will give the floor to Judge Brennan.
Well, I think that it would be a desirable thing to have a periodic constitutional convention, provided it behaved itself and simply proposed amendments. And I think that would be useful. And I think the founders of our nation expected us to do that. They knew that things were going to change in time, and that we had to keep up with times. The idea that we have all the liberals say, well, we have a living and breathing Constitution. Well, what they mean by that is we don't have a Constitution at all. The Supreme Court makes it up as they go along. And that's the so-called living Constitution. Well, the Constitution is a living document because it can be amended by the people. But George Washington told us that the Constitution can only be amended by the explicit and authentic act of the whole people. And now we have a whole people. We have a people of the United States. When the Constitution was first adopted, we didn't have people of the United States. We had people of the states. That's all we had at the time. But once the Constitution was adopted, we then had people who were both the people of Arkansas and Arizona and the people of the United States. So we're a dual citizenship country. Probably we're only one in the world like this. Dual sovereignty, dual citizenship. And when the Constitution of the United States is amended, it has to be amended on behalf of the people, not only of the states, but of the United States. And that's what George Washington meant when he said the explicit and authentic act of the whole people. And I think we can do that in Convention USA by having these delegates elected in county districts all over the United States. To address Neal's concern about one state, one vote, in Convention USA, there is one state, one vote, but there's also the second process, which is the majority of the delegates. So you have to have the majority of the delegates and one state, one vote, and a majority of the states, 3/4 of the states.
Thank you, Mr. Schuerer.
That's a great question. Are we going to create a perpetual system? I would refer back to Federalist Paper 57 and what Madison talked about there. It's probably the best explanation of term limits of the time. But they expected that there would be self-control and that people would go in and serve and come back home. That was the expectation. Now, in the 230 plus years, that expectation isn't there, and it needs to be defined in the U.S. Constitution. I don't believe states will agree to meet on a perpetual basis. There will be an end to any kind of convention, and they may not come out with any amendments. They may not be able to agree on anything. That is definitely a possibility. But I truly believe that Americans, U.S. citizens, will rise to the challenge and ask their state legislatures to do this for the future of the country, for our kids, for our grandkids, to deal with a lot of different issues. That is what the founders, the original drafters of our Constitution intended. It is time for us as bold citizens to make that step, to do those things. And as all of the folks that are putting things together, and there's been a lot of discussion and planning, as the judge had mentioned, through legislature associations and all of those different kinds of things. The Heartland Institute, one of their scholars by the name of Rob Nettleson from the Independence Institute in Colorado. Everybody likes to come to Colorado, so that's one of the reasons we're talking about even doing a test drive of a simulation prior to a national mock convention, because everybody likes coming to Colorado. But Rob Nettleson has been working hard coming up with rules that states can agree to. So when they come and meet, that the expectation is there. And as we're going through this whole process, wouldn't it be best to test drive it through a national mock convention and show that it can be done legally and orderly, and then stepping to the official process? And no matter what comes out of the convention, it requires 3/4 of the several states currently in the United States, at 38 states that have to ratify it. And that will either be done by state legislatures or by state convention as outlined in Article 5.
Thank you, Mr. Schuerer. We will now go to the next question.
West Suburban Patriots. It's a local Tea Party group. And basically, I'm just curious as to what you gentlemen would think would be the 3 most pressing issues that we need to press forward with in this process.
Mr. Schuerer.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. And if you go to campaignconstitution.com and go to our website, you can actually vote on our proposals. But what I've kind of highlighted as critical issues is timely budgets. Timely budget. The Congress has one responsibility. And our proposal, which is one group's idea, is if Congress, our congressmen and women and senators, cannot do their #1 responsibility, which is pass a budget, then they cannot run for re-election at their next term. They have to do what that they're constitutionally responsible to. Line item veto. I think that's something that is really critical. This pork barrel, all the things that the judge is concerned about, needs to be done line item veto. Spending limits. We need to have a limitation on federal spending. The general welfare clause does not open the door to anything you want to do anytime you want to do it. Save the Bill of Rights. What we mean by save the Bill of Rights is that any time one of those those first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution are to be changed, it takes unanimous consent from all the states. And we're looking 50 years down the road, and we're looking at issues of international law that's affecting court decisions today, or some of these radical legal systems that are out there that are in 50 years from now, we're going to have judges that think that they can apply those kinds of things to our system of government. And we're here to tell you today, it will not happen. And if the Bill of Rights, whether it's the Second Amendment, First Amendment, all of that, if that's going to be changed, it will require unanimous consent of all the states. One other one, revigorate the 10th Amendment and state repeal of federal laws and removal of federal judges.
Thank you, Judge Brennan.
I'm sorry. 3 things, 3 most important issues. Very difficult to nail them down, but I'll try. The first one I would say is the Supreme Court. Senator Sam Erwin suggested 30, 40 years ago that we have a vetting, nominating panel of state chief justices to give the candidates for appointment to the United States Supreme Court to the president. And I think that would be a very good idea. Do any of you realize that 2 of the 3 branches of the federal government are populated 100% by the graduates of 3 schools? Yale, Harvard, and Columbia. Can you just imagine, get somebody that knows numbers and figures and calculators, figure out what the chances are that could happen by accident? With some 200 law schools in the United States, that those 2 branches of government will be entirely populated by the graduates of 3 schools. There's an oligarchy in Washington, D.C. What I call the Velvet Corridor that runs from Cambridge, Massachusetts, down to Washington, D.C. And it's because these people think that they govern the people of the United States. And we've got so many people out here in the Heartland and that are simply ignored. When I was dean of the Cooley Law School, I wrote to then Chief Justice Warren Burger, and I said, how come all your clerks are from about 4 or 5 law schools? And I get this pompous letter back from Burger, and he says, well, I have a committee of my former clerks who make some recommendations, and I've been very satisfied with it. Well, his former clerks are all from Harvard, for Christ's sake. So what are they going to give you? They'll give you another Harvard man. Well, so what did I do? I wrote to all the deans of all the law schools around the country, and I said, let's put together a book, the American Law School, National Law School Deans List. And we'll all put our top people in this book, and we'll have nice pictures of them and their resumes, what great people they are. Put the book all together and send it to the United States Supreme Court. You know how many of those young people got interviewed for jobs in the United States Supreme Court? None. Zippo. They don't want to talk to anybody outside the inner circle of those people that are running our country down there in Washington, D.C. They don't give a damn about the heartlands, and that's part of the problem. Now, the second important issue, as far as I'm concerned, is the House of Representatives hasn't changed in number for 100 years. The Constitution says it should be proportional. I don't know what the proportional should be, 1 to 100,000, 1 to 50,000, whatever it is. But it should be written in the Constitution, and it should be continually expanding body to represent the people of the United States, because the people of the United States are continuing to expand. And when we expand, it should expand, instead of keeping all that power in 435 people. The more people they represent, the more power they have, the more they have to spend to get reelected. So the more they have to play footsie with the lobbyists. So that's the problem is, the bigger their districts, the more money they spend, the more time they spend raising money, and the more time they spend having lunch with lobbyists. So finally, the third one that I would be concerned about was... and I made myself a note, and I've lost it now already. But well, there are a number of other very important issues that I think need to be considered, and we've got this whole list of them on our website. 23 of them. Anybody can go. You don't have to sign up as a delegate, but you can go on there and you can answer those questions and see what you think about them. Oh, I know that the other one was the Jefferson Amendment. Thomas Jefferson said if he could make one amendment to the Constitution of the United States, it would be to abolish the Congress's power to borrow money. Now you think about it. The Constitution says that the Congress can coin money. If I had a machine down my basement that cranked out real $100 bills, not counterfeit, real $100 bills, I would never borrow any money. I got a right to manufacture money. Why the heck would I borrow money? Why does the United States of America have to borrow money? We're in the business of manufacturing money. So what we need in this country is, first of all, the Jefferson Amendment say, don't let them borrow money, period. That's the first thing. The second thing is, there should be a constitutional limitation on how much new money they can issue. And it should be based on the population. As the population expands, we need more money, so we should allow ourselves to have more money. Now, there's one other thing that you have to plug into that if you do that, and that is you got to find some way to finance an emergency, okay? Because all these plans like Compact for America and the rest of them, all these hopeful things about how we're going to balance the budget, they always have a little bottom line that says, of course, in an emergency, you can borrow more money, you raise the national debt. I would say in an emergency, you should be able to pass a tax, a one-time tax. Hit everybody hard for one time, but it wouldn't be a continuing tax. It would just be a one-time tax. Well, that's the one proposition that the people who voted on our website are against. They're against taxes. But if you're going to have a system where they can't borrow and where the limited how much money they can manufacture, then you have to have some way to handle an emergency. And I would say that either a tax or a provision that members of Congress who vote for borrowing lose their right to be reelected.
Thank you, Judge Brennan. Do we have any other additional questions from the audience? Seeing none, we will now go into the closing statements before we adjourn tonight's event. So now we will give both Judge Brennan and Mr. Schuerer about 5 minutes to close for the evening, so I give it to Judge Brennan.
Well, I've made too many speeches already. When you get an old man cranked up, it's a lot of. So all I want to do is I want to thank Joe Bass and Kyle and Jim and others here at the Heartland Institute for arranging this. It's been a lot of fun for me to do this remotely as I have, although I wish I could be in the room with you folks and press the flesh a little bit and chat with you and see where you come from and so forth. But another time, perhaps, we'll do that. In the meantime, I want to thank the Heartland Institute people for doing this. We need more of this sort of thing. We need more debates, more discussion of issues This circus that they've got going now for the President of the United States is fun. I confess my wife and I are addicted to it. We spend all kinds of time watching the latest analysis and the latest polls and so forth. So it's, I guess, next to the NFL, politics is the sport that Americans like the most. But nevertheless, I think there is room for intelligent, sensible, issue-related debate. You got to take up one issue at a time. You got to get people of goodwill, intelligent people. I would love to debate George Will on the question of term limits, because I wrote in my book that I thought term limits were like taking cough drops to treat lung cancer. And there are problems in Washington, D.C., but I don't think term limits is the solution. And I would just very much love to debate him. But I don't know if anybody's going to support that debate where we'd get the money to go on television. George won't work for nothing. I will, but he won't. And so in any case, I thank you so much for the opportunity to visit with you. And come on to my website, and if you want to communicate with me, my email address is there too. So, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Judge Brennan. Mr. Schuerer.
Well, it's been great tonight to not only engage Judge Brennan and his years of wisdom as a very prominent attorney in this country and training the next generation of young people to enter the field of law. I'm reminded by my attorney friends that, just about half of the framers of the Constitution were attorneys. So again, attorneys are a necessary function when we have a legal system we're doing here. But what I'm asking folks to do is take a look at Campaign Constitution. See if this is something that you want to be part of. Go on to our website, campaignconstitution.com, and vote on our proposals and be honest. I mean, we don't want a bunch of folks that just agree with us because we think it's the right thing to do. Just as with Judge Brennan, I went out and filled out his survey, and many of the things that are kind of stewing out there in the country, we all know what the problem is. How do we get to the end solution? That's what a mock convention will do for us. If people are interested in the idea and the concept and wish to support us financially, you can go on our website and do that also. But in the meantime, we want to bring the public discussion to the public square. We the people, bold citizens, working through a mock convention with responsible constitutional reform will bring us better leaders, which in turn will give us better government.
Thank you, Mr. Schuerer, and thank you, everybody, for being here tonight, and thank you to all our people who join us on our online live stream. To continue following the discussion, you can follow us on Twitter at USCONSTREFORM. That is, again, at USCONSTREFORM. And you can also follow us on Heartland's Constitutional Reform website at www.heartland.org. Click on the button that says Constitutional Reform, and you will find all the latest content. Thank you, everybody. Please drive home safely, and have a good night.